The saga between the Police Service Commission and the former police commissioner continues, unfortunately. I don't think this is beneficial to our country, at least in the bacchanal form of it, as in the he said, she said, and the do for do kind of thing that it seems to be going on. There are people with some people on their side, and they're doing some things behind the scenes to make things uncomfortable for the other party, etc., etc. I don't think that side of it is good for the country. However, I think the fact that some of these maneuverings that previously may have been much more silent and much more secret is now not so much. And in that sense, I could see a positive for this country in that now more people in the country now know things that go on behind the curtains. We can now see some of the activities that usually would have gone on without us knowing. Now we could possibly know it, and some things are more explanatory because of it. Now I could understand why our police service seems in such a disarray, because the disarray starts from the very top apparently. And adding to that, recently this weekend a letter was released. Now, during some of the height of this bacchanal, as it was going on, the Prime Minister, in trying to distance himself from it, was saying that he already voiced his displeasure in the former police commissioner. He told the Police Service Commission about his displeasure since last year. He wrote to them a letter, and it was interesting that he mentioned that he wrote to them a letter. And he's mentioning this when the former commissioner is already out of the job. And the letter was written a year ago. So obviously there's some timing to do with the release of that letter and what he means by that. And now, on that letter, the letter itself that the Prime Minister wrote wasn't released, but the Prime Minister would have written a letter to the Police Service Commission. And then the Service Commission would have responded to the police commissioner, telling him of what the Prime Minister, who was also and is also the head of the National Security Council, said. Now, we're going to go through some of this letter that the Police Service Commission chairman wrote to the police commissioner back last year, 2020. And it tells some interesting things. It tells some unique insights, and also it tells some obvious things that we would have known and seen as citizens of the country, and we ourselves may have had some problems with. This article is the express version of it. I believe it was originally The Guardian that had the entire text of the leaked letter, but this is the express article. Text of letter dated September 25th, 2020 to then Commissioner of Police Gary Griffith from former Police Service Commission Chair Bliss C. Prasad. By the way, now is a good time to tap that like button. Make sure you select it and drop a comment at the end now anytime you choose. Just let me know. One, let me know that you're still listening, and let me know what you think about the topics at hand. So let's get straight into the news. Or regarding complaint made against you by the chairman of the National Security Council. The Police Service Commission is in receipt of a letter dated 16th of September 2020 from the Honorable Prime Minister and chairman of the Security Council, in which he has expressed serious concerns about unacceptable behavior on your part and your suitability to continue to hold the office of Commissioner of Police. Now, bear in mind, again, this letter is phrased as being written from the Police Service Commission, in particular the chairman of the Police Service Commission, who then at that time would have been Miss Bliss C. Prasad, and it is directed at the police commissioner at that time, who would have been Mr. Gary Griffith. So we summarize below in the numbered paragraphs, the complaint of the PM reported to the commission. Now, this complaint goes on for a while. It's not a very short complaint. I believe the number of paragraphs, if I scroll down to the end here, the number of paragraphs ultimately ends at 21. So the Prime Minister had a lot to complain about, apparently, and the Police Service Commission was pretty thorough in explaining it to the then commissioner. So, starting at the beginning, 1. And this one is a bit lengthy. It's kind of setting the scene for everything that proceeds after. This is the cause of at least of this specific issue. On Saturday, 12th September 2020, the PM made the following statement at a press conference at the Diplomatic Center. This is a statement said by the Prime Minister Rowley, back last year in September. I said to my colleague, Minister of National Security, Mr. Stuart Young, then, where Trinidad and Tobago is, we expect that there would be firm and sustained law enforcement for those who believe that the only thing they will accept and respond to is being restrained by a police officer. And as I say that, let me join this conversation now. In Trinidad and Tobago, we expect that the law will be applied to every person, regardless of race, color, creed, class, or social standing. Because those who believe that they are beyond the reach of this virus, you could say so for yourself, and that may suit you in comforting your irresponsible conduct, but in so doing, you pose a threat to the rest of our national community, to the little children, etc., etc., etc. So he went in on this whole incident, if you recall, was a presumed private party, I believe in Bayside Towers, an upper scale residential area, residential apartment area, and there was some kind of pool party going on there. And that was at the start of some of the COVID health measures, and some people were very critical of it. And it seemed like the police dealt with that softer than they dealt with some of the other instances they were dealing with. And the Prime Minister entered into this debate. The request through me, through the Minister of National Security, through the police service, that we ensure that there is an improvement in the conduct of our nationals, where the law applies across the board, especially to those whose priority is partying. Persons who are partying and spreading the virus must feel the full brunt of the law. It is not for me to tell the Commissioner of Police who to arrest and who not to arrest and how to apply the law, but as Prime Minister, I could tell the Commissioner of Police that the law must be applied to protect us in Trinidad and Tobago from those that are not prepared to listen and are not prepared to fight the fight that we want to fight to bring this virus under control. We can do no more, but we'll do the best with what we have. Now, that entire speech had a lot of politicizing in it. And can you really blame the man? He's a politician. Politicians politicize things. And he was entering this conversation from the direction of the average man being the average man, and really not liking how these laws could seem to be executed in a partial manner. Now, bear in mind, just about a week ago, it was the Prime Minister and several other high-ranking members that were at the President's house enjoying their dinner while, and this was before the state of emergency was lifted, while the regulations would have stipulated that some of those activities couldn't have occurred in some other people's residences. So there is some difference in how the law is enforced, even to them. But the Prime Minister was entering on that side. And the Commissioner of Police back then took offense to this. Number 2, the second paragraph. This appears to have been interpreted by you as being offensive to you, and thereafter you embarked on a course of behavior unbecoming of the Office of Commissioner of Police. 3, that same evening you sent the PM a number of messages taking issue with what the PM had said. These messages were disrespectful to the office of the Prime Minister and betrayed a lack of balance expected from an officer in your position. Now, I find it interesting so many times in this, how they would see he was messaging the PM now. Obviously, he would have communication channels open with the Prime Minister, but it seems like in this specific case, he messaged the Prime Minister way too often. Like he was double and triple messaging out there and really getting on the Prime Minister's nerves. That's at least how it seems to be phrased here. Number 4, on the following day, Sunday 13th September 2020, you continued messaging the PM in a challenging, aggressive and disrespectful manner. Wow. You're still messaging the man's phone. Number 5, you also had a public statement taking issue with what the PM had stated at the press conference. Now, this, going through almost all of these paragraphs, they tell a similar tone, that the former commissioner's reaction to whenever his name is called was the main issue that many people had. And it wasn't necessarily in his competence with carrying out his specific duties as Commissioner of the Police, but his reactions with everyday issues, and with a politician being a politician around you, bearing in mind you are going to have to do your duties in and around politicians. Number 6, you made inappropriate comments and statements to the public via a live radio interview on I-95 using insulting and disrespectful language. You suggested that the PM was a racist and a hypocrite. It was reported that on the said Sunday, 13 September, you warned members of the TTPS to ignore advice from the chairman of the National Security Council, that would be the Prime Minister. You told member of the tips that the PM was trying to throw the police under the bus. Number 8, as a result of these disturbing developments in which you were publicly disrespecting the office of the Prime Minister, and by extension the chairman of the National Security Council, the PM as chairman of the National Security Council requested a meeting on Monday 14th September with you and acting Deputy Commissioners of Police, Ford and Jacobs, alongside with the Honorable Attorney General. And prior to this meeting, number 9, you were interviewed on TV6 and Radio 102 FM, and you repeated your tirade of troubling accusations against the office of the Prime Minister. Number 10, at the meeting on Monday 14th, the PM read out his statement, and he referred to paragraph 1 and sought to explain the different roles of the executive and the TTPS, in particular that as Prime Minister, he was in charge of policy. He stated that in his 40 years of public service, he had never known a commissioner of police to publicly engage a Prime Minister, and certainly not in the manner that you had done in previous days. And whether you like Dr. Rowley or not, I could kind of agree with that. I haven't been around for 40 years, but in the time I've been around, I haven't really seen police commissioners engaging with the Prime Minister or high-ranking political officials like that. It really seems a bit odd, and especially considering you do have channels of communication open. So to do that in the public square may be a bit premature, especially as the Commissioner of Police, and it doesn't lend to good behavior. So the Prime Minister took umbrage to that, and he called them into a meeting, and in this meeting he brought up his issues with the Commissioner of Police, and he spoke to him specifically about the things that the Commissioner was saying, and he said that he didn't like it. The PM advised you that he was not engaging in any debate on public and private property, but that he spoke about enforcing the law as it exists. He pointed out that a law that does not exist cannot be enforced. The PM emphasized that he does not give instructions to the TTPS and suggested that it would be advisable for you to take a step back and do some reflecting, and you and he could then move forward, and consider the unfortunate occurrence to be water under the bridge. Now, after that meeting, the Prime Minister told him that he would be writing to the Police Service Commission to bring their attention to these issues. Now, later that day, there was a news article published where they phrased the meeting as saying, and I remember this distinctly, they phrased it as saying that the Prime Minister summoned the Commissioner of Police and the Deputy Commissioners to a meeting, and the Commissioner didn't like that. And after that bit, he went on another tirade about the Prime Minister, that the Prime Minister cannot summon him, and the Prime Minister doesn't have the authority to do such. On Tuesday 15th, you appeared to take offense to a story carried in the Trinidad Express and sent the PM disrespectful and threatening messages again. So that's days in a row he keeps messaging the Prime Minister. Now, I don't understand what he expected to happen after this. Like, really, what do you expect? You stated in an interview on CNC Television that you could not be summoned by a Prime Minister and Chairman of the National Security Council, and made statements unbecoming of the Commissioner of Police. And even after above public statements, you continued sending messages to the Prime Minister. Again, more text messages, and these texts, we actually have the text of these texts, and this is how it reads. Gary, anyone who has who has to use a reporter to push an agenda to discredit me via using himself as a government source shows weakness and fear to confront the person he is trying to undermine and intimidate them would be writing to the PSC also about political interference of the police in the performance of our duties also. Let the reporting begin. The Prime Minister: I am sure the Commission would want to know all about any such matter, but as I said to you yesterday, you need to do a bit of reflecting and stop this interpreting and persecution complex that seems to be surrounding you. Maybe you should just stop and let good sense prevail. Gary: agreed, sir, but likewise, sending messages to RIA to discredit the police commissioner helps no one. Let us move on. Prime Minister: I consider your correspondence a threat, and as such, since you refuse to be guided and assisted and advised, I am to advise you that I will report this matter to the Minister and the Commission for their urgent attention. You are now a person out of control and cannot be allowed to continue this way. I have given you the best of my advice and guidance, but you flatly refuse to be guided to an acceptable pattern of behavior. This kind of discussion went on for the most part. Several other occurrences of back and forth between the two of them, ultimately ending in this letter being written from the commissioner and being sent out to Gary Griffith, demanding that he respond to it. There's more to it, and you could read all of it. It gets pretty lengthy, as I'm sure I've already read quite a bit of it. And I understand what the Prime Minister is saying to some extent, that as Prime Minister, if he's Prime Minister, he can make statements on policy. He can make statements on law enforcement policy. And in his statement, he also said that he does not have the power or the capability or authority to direct the police commissioner. So the police commissioner jumping out himself after that does seem to be a bit overreacting. And on top of it, after having a meeting, to continue doing it does seem a bit too late in and late on heavy. But on one side, I can also understand where you could be squinting and watching this, and I am happy that it functioned in this way. That although the Prime Minister lacked confidence in our police commissioner since last year, he wasn't able to remove him. And it may be curious to know if some of what happened this year was actually the Prime Minister's maneuvering in removing the commissioner. Because if he had no confidence in him over that issue from last year, I don't think it would require underhanded movements to get rid of him. This is something that could have been voiced and it could have been said in Parliament, and you could have voted against him when the list comes up. So I'm not quite sure if this would be reason enough to want to get rid of him. But I do see the reason in it. I do see the reason, and to be fair, I don't think this is a surprise to anyone. Drop a comment. Tell me in the comments, is anyone surprised by the fact that what got Mr. Griffith into trouble was his tendency to overly react whenever his name is called or whenever attention is drawn negatively to him? It seems... No, I understand if you think you're in the right, you feel like you must answer and you must reply to something. But if you overdo it, when you're in a public position, you would always have criticism, and you cannot afford to attempt to try and quell every criticism. And in this case, it wasn't even a direct criticism. It was a politician speaking political speak. But obviously, as is expected, who would have expected anything differently? The former commissioner responded to the release of this letter, obviously. And he states in a Guardian article here, Griffith finds leak of PM's letter to ex-PSC chair curious. And I agree, it's curious. When you look at it from a whole perspective, I may like the fact that I get this information and I can now know what was happening exactly inside of those situations. But I am wondering, where does this information come from? And is this information in pursuit of of a beneficial end to some major player in this entire saga? Who is doing the leaks? Where did this letter come from? Who emailed or sent this letter to the news? And why did they do it? Was it just about wanting the nation to get information? Or was it trying to get something to go their way? I'm not sure. But in Gary's response, former Police Commissioner Gary Griffith is looking forward to the merit list for Police Commissioner on which his name appears, going forward to the selection process, and remains undeterred by the criticisms in former Police Service Commission Chairman Bliss C. Prasad's September 25th, 2020 letter to him. Griffith confirmed this following revelation of C. Prasad's comments in the Guardian article, and they go on summarizing what the comments were about. On October 1st, Griffith announced that he'd apologized to Rowley in writing. So he had apologized over this entire incident. I'm not sure how the Prime Minister treated that apology, if he did accept that apology, or if he still holds ill will over that issue, if he considers it done. Now, as you've heard by many, not necessarily psychologists, it may just be online memes. But as you've heard from many of them, the best apology is changed behavior. And if the main problem, if the reason that the Prime Minister lost confidence in the former police commissioner was because of his reactions to statements said, I am not sure if an apology from the former commissioner would show that he isn't likely to do the same again, as we may see in this very article. Last Thursday, when contacted by Guardian Media on the matter, Griffith had said the issue with the Prime Minister was resolved and they had moved on. Griffith also noted that the issue wasn't part of PSC's assessment of him. Government subsequently changed the law for him specifically to act as Commissioner of Police after his contract ended in August, and he was shortlisted by the PSC for the acting commissioner post. Therefore, he felt C. Prasad's letter or report can't be used against him, and I understand that. I understand that completely. That's one of the reasons that the leak of this letter at this point looks a lot more suspicious, because that letter, bear in mind, was since last year September 2020, and this year, more than a year later, we have had quite a few things going on. We've seen that they changed a specific law. After the letter, they changed a specific law to allow him to act as Commissioner of Police. And then, after the letter, the Police Service Commission still sent his name in on their short list. So, I'm not sure what that letter is supposed to tell us now. If all the people involved in the letter since last year, still after the letter was written, still went with choosing Gary Griffith on their list, then the letter has no consequence. The letter doesn't tell us really why this whole incident happened. This incident, if I may remind us again, stems from when the list went to the president's house, to the president's office, and then the former chairman of the Police Service Commission carried the list back. And no one knows anything after that. Or at least no one says they know anything after that. Yesterday, however, Griffith took issue with the words of C. Prasad, who he claimed breached regulations, withdrew the Commissioner of Police merit list from the President's house without authorization, alleged he interfered in an investigation when Justice Stanley John's letter showed otherwise, tried to suspend the Commissioner of Police without authorization, and refused to rescind it when the other Police Service commissioners said she should. The last person we should hear from is her. Instead, there should be a police probe of misbehavior in public office or sedition to try to remove a sitting Commissioner of Police illegally. Now, if I was former Chairman Bliss C. Prasad, I would have vested interest in not wanting the former Commissioner to get back his post as Commissioner, because it seems obviously that you may consider it an axe to grind in some way, a vendetta in some way, or you may say that he wants to make sure no law was broken. Either way, it seems like she's kind of in his sights. obviously, it couldn't just be left at Griffith saying that he feels this letter no longer affects him. He still has to go and re-adjudicate the matter and let us know how he was innocent. Griffith said there were only 10 people at any point in the Bayside pool, not 40, and he had no intention of breaching people's constitutional rights. If that deemed me guilty of being erratic and indisciplined, then I'm guilty. But as I did 6 years ago when I operated in the same manner, I won't breach my oath of office, citizens' rights, or lie, he said. Now, this is a bit of a bait and switch. 6 for 9 Griffith is hitting here. I don't think the accusations of him being erratic and indisciplined referred to him and his treatment at the Bayside Towers specifically. I think the issue came, and if you followed the letter that the Police Service Commission wrote, the issue came more with his response to something the Prime Minister said about that incident, not the incident itself. So he's mischaracterizing this a bit here. The Prime Minister has a responsibility to consider the will of the people over personal political agendas. This obviously wasn't done. As Commissioner of Police, I had to operate within the law, not personal whim, which I did courageously daily. Now, he goes back in again. I'm sure if the Prime Minister, or when the Prime Minister sees this, he wouldn't be happy again. And with someone who has a vote on you entering into that position, I don't have much hopes of seeing Mr. Griffith returning to that position. That's all I have for now. Tell me, do you think Mr. Griffith has a chance of returning as police commissioner? And do you want him to? Would you have lost confidence in him with that style of behavior he has? Or do you think he may be competent enough in his duties to excuse that? Drop a comment and tell me. I hope you were educated, informed, or entertained, and stay tuned. I'll see you in the next video.
And you feel the music, rising with the tide.